Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're absolutely delighted to be able to share our story of the monastery. For me, it's been a 28-year journey that we're going to try and cram into the next sort of 10, 15 minutes. But just to put this in context, we were very blessed to inherit an Edward Welby Pugin Grade 2 star listed monument building. It had been at the heart and soul of the Gorton community for over 130 years, serving everybody really in a religious capacity from cradle to grave. So we knew we had big shoes to fill because those Franciscans looked after everybody so well locally. And as you can see from that picture, it was a beautiful church and local people were very proud of it. But sadly, with a lot of things, got to the 60s, 70s, 80s, people stopped going to church. Church numbers declined. They could no longer maintain this incredible building. And sadly, there were just 6 elderly Franciscan brothers left rattling around in this big building. The church at that stage decided to close it, deconsecrate it, and they sold it to property developers who were going to put floors of apartments in it. They took deposits off local people in the community who were romantically thinking it'd be nice to live where the brothers lived, and then they stripped out everything of value and literally left the building unprotected, and the rest really is history, because very soon after that, the building got very, very badly vandalised. To me, the property developers were the original vandals because they took everything out of value and sold it. But we unfortunately inherited a building where all the lead had been stolen off the roofs. The building had really been, a lot of the altars had been smashed up, and it was in such a bad condition that it got listed as an endangered world monument site in the way that Moseley Road, Bath has been. That for us was almost a catalyst really for us to step up and take control. We formed a charitable trust in 1996. We wanted to continue with those Franciscan values, looking after the community, but we appreciated it was no longer religious. This was about saving a building, but also in one of the most deprived communities in Manchester, it was actually about how relevant it could be for the community, because there was such high unemployment and the deprivation indices were really off the scale. The Endangered World Monument listing meant that we could then take ownership of the building. We bought it for £1, which everybody looks at today and thinks is a huge bargain. But believe me, when you're taking on £6.5 million worth of negative equity, it isn't so good. We tried to bid for lottery funding. First scheme was turned down because it wasn't commercial enough. We then thought we'd do a Franciscan-style training hotel. That was turned down because it was too commercial. So in the end, we went back for 1/3 bid. We renamed it the Pugin Centre, and that gave us the opportunity to get the £6.5 million we needed for the first restoration. And we have always had our little strap lines, which have been inspiring the future, respecting the past, but also realising potential. And that in a health and wellbeing sense is not just for our staff and our volunteers and the people that come through our door, but it's actually for every member in our community to be proud of this building once again. So eventually restoration began in 2005. We have subsequently done another £3.5 million restoration to replace the front wing so that we can actually try and earn money at the same time as we obviously are serving the community. And remarkably, we've actually now won awards for being the best UK's unusual venue. And it's like the equivalent of the meeting and conference industry's Oscars. We won it 3 years running. Quite remarkable, but it's also about employing local people. And the reminder is always every penny we make goes back into sustaining the heritage asset. So we don't say we're not for profit, even though we're a charity. The more money we can make, the more good we can do, and the more we can put back. So we now have our building working, modern day monastery, earning enough from commercial activities to sustain itself. And then guess what? We had lockdown. And everything changed overnight. We went from 38 staff to just 4. Just like Richard, my first kind of lockdown job was putting people on furlough and then making them redundant. But thankfully we survived because of cultural recovery funding, but we realised that was the time to change things dramatically, because as we all know, everybody was suffering and suffering even more because of COVID. So we decided to open the monastery Sunday through Thursday, free of charge, community first. We set up a sanctuary. And we decided to start a counselling and a listening service for the community free of charge with some cultural recovery funding money. We also invited other trusted partners into our building to share the space because other charities were suffering and couldn't afford their rent. One of those was Manchester Camerata Orchestra, who were renowned for doing music, innovation and health projects. And they run a weekly dementia cafe for us. And that's been so successful now. It's been rolled out across Greater Manchester through the Music in Mind project. But I think I've talked enough now. I'm going to hand over to Jeannine, who's going to explain a little bit more about what the modern day monastery actually does and how that fits with our listening service and the sanctuary. Thank you.
Okay, hi everybody, I'm Jeannine, and I came to work with Elaine about 10 years ago with this vision of what a modern day monastery was all about, and we've had quite a lot of twists and turns in the thing. But it's been a very interesting building because it's deconsecrated. So imagine in a big city, metropolis like Manchester, we've got this deconsecrated building that's very, very sacred in its build. Like people come into the building and they look up there in awe. They've got the rootedness of this phenomenal building. And so we attract a lot of people of faiths, no faiths, and then a huge amount of spiritual but not religious, the SBNR category, which interestingly enough, from a health perspective, brings all the yoga, the sound baths, the Tai Chi, even Reiki.
And the hour of silence.
We've got an hour of silence that happens every day. So we've become kind of a mecca for almost quite the modern type of spirituality that's emerging within a secular society, which has been really, really interesting to observe. And then, of course, because you can see from the picture before, it's such a beautiful building. So we have a lot of concerts, we have spiritual concerts, we have the Camerata, we have really high level cultural concerts and dance events, and people are coming and really enjoying this space for heritage, arts, culture, and for well-being. And we started to realize that it's kind of the perfect place to cement the links between heritage, art, culture, and well-being, and actually integrative health, because of this holistic view that we're seeing from demand of who's coming to us within the building. So we started to think about how we could create an exemplar model with beautiful integrative health destination within Manchester. And one of the kind of grounding projects that we've been most proud of is the listening service that we've created at the monastery. And when I was talking to Elaine about the ideas about a modern day monastery, she always told me about Professor Aidan Halligan, who was a great in Manchester, who'd set up homeless charities, and he'd always worked with all different varieties of people within Manchester, very well known. And he'd always said if there was a place where people could just go and be heard and listened to, and people could be bear witness to, that it would be such a tremendous service, and it could help with any downward spirals later in the journey. And myself, I'm a psychologist, and putting together this idea of a listening service, and then also the models of trauma-informed work that I've become very, very interested in, we realized that we had this amazing opportunity to create a non-pathologizing, compassionate listening service within the monastery. And it's been incredibly successful. From Sunday to Thursday, between 10 and 4, anyone can self-refer in, and there's just someone there to actually care and actually to listen. And we've run 1,500 of these free face-to-face and listening sessions and counselling sessions, and trained over 38 volunteers now within this very, very special, compassionate approach, which is trauma-informed. And it's been really beautiful. I mean, it just makes my heart light every day. And then the people coming in, the stories that we've heard of people back at work, coming off waiting lists, with something that's just so simple and so beautiful. So we knew we've got this little nugget of something really special, of bringing together, these new burgeoning models of trauma-informed with something as simple and very much in line with the Franciscan values of something very on the ground that's just so simple. So we've been very, very proud of that service because it's made such a huge impact in so many people's lives. And then we've got placement counsellors. We've been now working with other people delivering health coaching. So we've got placement health coaches coming up, and people are coming to us, and we're beginning to draw together these threads of this amazing model. And so what have we found? And it's been very interesting as the person who founded the listening service, that when we actually advertised for volunteer listeners, we had over 140 applicants. And these are people who've often been through something traumatic in their lives in the community who really want to give back. And we started to realize that out there's a lot of community wisdom that we were harnessing and then teaching them this beautiful, compassionate approach to mental health, and pioneering this really amazing new training that we've developed. And so we've been harnessing lived experience and community wisdom. And the training we've also now put online, because we can see that it's a 6-week training, and the transformation in the volunteers' lives themselves has been absolutely phenomenal. Within about 3 weeks of doing the training, the trainees are coming and saying, all my relationships in my life have been changed, because we teach them to become very, very compassionate to themselves. We use, and I've stuck in a little picture of IFS, if anyone knows it, Richard Schwartz's internal family systems, because it teaches people to recognize that they've got an anxious part, a suicidal part, a depressed part, but it's not all of them. And although our listeners may have struggled with things like that in the past, they're still coming in with their depressed part or their anxious part, and they develop a voice to speak to themselves, almost like their own client, that's so gentle and so beautiful that transformation takes place within them. They use that same compassionate voice to talk to their family, to their work, and then that's the voice that they use in our listening service to the person that comes in. And it's just incredible. So we're now seeing this incredible service and this incredible listening service within this beautiful building, within the heritage, and putting the two things together. I'm like, wow, you've got this awe, this rootedness, and you've got this beautiful, compassionate service, and putting them together, and it just makes this fantastic new intervention, which is really an early intervention, but extremely powerful. And when we spoke to clients afterwards, they will go and walk around the cloisters. They will go to the hour of silence. We're getting people out, and they'll be joining all of the activities, of which there's many that we do. So you can see these beautiful pictures here. I mean, this was an event that we ran in the cloisters, an ecstatic dance, health and wellbeing event, and we've got yoga, and people just going relaxing in the great nave. And even though, like I mentioned at the beginning, it's a secular building, we're touching on something here that we really feel in Manchester that there's a real thirst for, but because of secularism, etc., they're not being able to touch and get into. So with integrative health and the heritage building, we're really feeling that we're being able to do something very, very special. And then for me, I was thinking, when I read there was a heritage building within 1 mile of every house in the UK, the thought for me of someone struggling with their mental health and not thinking they're going to have to go to a GP or to A&E, to actually coming to somewhere beautiful like this, meeting with someone who's got a massive heart, who just listens to them. And then next thing you know, they're in an activity and their lives have transformed and they've changed. So for me, that's how I see the cementing between heritage and health.
Okay, Allison. You can tell we're very enthusiastic.
It's because of what we've done.
We love what we're doing. Yeah. So this shows the 3-stage process of somebody seeking support. And it was exactly my own journey that led me to the monastery, where I was in a bit of a difficult season. My career was at a crossroads. I was struggling with the menopause, and my children were all grown up and starting to leave home. And I guess I just felt quite lost, but my mental health started to deteriorate. And although I contacted my GP, I was on a waiting list with a probable 6-month sort of timescale on it. And so I actually arrived at the monastery as somebody needing support. And that was the very room, that sofa there, that red sofa, where I sat and I had this wonderful experience called the listening service. And I tell you what, for the first time in a long time, I sat there and I felt heard, I felt valued, and I just felt safe to be everything and say everything that was on my mind without fear of judgment. And it was truly transformational. And so when we talk about a holistic approach in well-being, often, we talk about the mind and the body when it comes to well-being, but perhaps less so about the spirit and the soul. And I am a believer, I am a Christian. And so for me, going to the monastery, even though it has been deconsecrated, I definitely connected with the spiritual aspects. I could feel it in the walls and the floors. And so I'd have a listening service, and then I might just go and sit in the great nave and just look up at the pillars and the light coming through, and I'd see the saints. And I just felt that it was okay for a moment that I could be in this place and not really have it all figured out, but it suddenly feel okay. And so I do think that, buildings like the monastery, naturally they still, in my mind, are a holy vessel, but I think we're all holy vessels as well. And so there's a real connection between the place and the people and the place. So bizarrely, as I'd had these 3 free listening services and had this, great transformation inside, I was intrigued. I couldn't understand how it could be that this service was free and this person was a volunteer. And so I wanted to give back naturally. And so I inquired about how to get involved. And little did I know, the things that I'd done in my own career and the business background that I'd had, working on projects and growth and franchising and the like, just so happened that at the sanctuary in that particular place and time, my skills were very much needed. And so I almost feel that I was called to the monastery. And though I arrived in this state of sort of semi-brokenness, it was there waiting for me. And so one of our current projects, which is the listening service, our vision for it is to see Manchester as the city that listens. And so we've got real huge ambition for what we do in the monastery and in the sanctuary to actually ripple out across the city. So whether that's at schools, colleges, universities, hospitals, hospices, community centres, even prisons and places of conflict or mediation, the listening service can just be a welcome addition to all of those places where people do need to feel that they're being heard. And so, we've got real big plans there to carry on doing the seeds that were planted. And this is what I love about heritage. The seeds that were planted originally by the Franciscan monks who brought the monastery into being, that Elaine sort of replanted when she took stewardship of the building. We've seen this beautiful formation and flowering of the products and services that we offer in the monastery. And we're very much into organic growth because a little has gone a long way. We've had, delightful stories and people just being transformed from what they've experienced in the monastery. This is just a little gimmicky picture here of us fruit developing in terms of just, looking at the nutrients that we're putting into it, the soil and the conditions of how we operate, and thinking, where else could this go? And so what's next? One of the projects I've been working on is that we've documented absolutely everything that we do in the listening service. In a way, we've created our recipe of ingredients for success, because we know that in order to duplicate the same output into a brand new location, we need to have it all process mapped out. And so we're definitely keen to see it duplicated into other places around the city and in other heritage buildings around the UK. because the listening service just lends itself to this kind of environment. I'm sure you'll agree. So for us to explore and diversify, some of the things we've looked at doing is having not just listening in person, because that's the creme de la creme, but to do it via telephone, on Zoom, to even maybe have pop-up listening services where it's not fixed in a building, but it can travel to you. So maybe at events and conferences and fairs and that sort of thing. And also diversification of the listening itself. So we've looked at maybe could we do executive listening for the corporate world and go into, like, you know, executive leadership team meetings and that sort of thing. And also the other thing about it is that we recognise that we want to be sustainable as a business. So whilst we have been very grateful for the funding that we've had, we do actually want to sustain ourselves, and there comes in the business modelling and the monetisation approaches that I can bring. So in closing, what I just want to say is that I think we're at an incredible time for community empowerment, and health and healing and heritage all goes together, and now is the time for the harvest. Thank you for listening.